So,
Okay, Beth, go ahead.
I would like to ask if you're like what the plans are for the next things that they're working on. Is there discussion on not using the alpha system layer and having the ability to apply that script via a HUD? Like have a function that can
Well,
call
there's
that?
not a specific plan for that, but it's one of the things that's been proposed. Is basically having some sort of LSL functions for modifying your outfit, so that then you could drive that stuff from a HUD. But yeah, in terms of like what's next for kind of avatar and content creation stuff, it's a little early to say. You guys may already know this, but we've had a very big project to kind of move all of our servers to the cloud in the last year, and that has been a huge it's taken a huge amount of time and energy for the team, and so a lot of other discussions about kind of new features have been on hold in the course of that. At this point, that's basically done. There's still some follow-on work that's taken quite a bit of time, but over the next few few weeks and months, we're going to have more time to talk about that stuff. So I'll be talking about that at the content meeting as further along in the discussions.
And one thing that I noticed, I just went today to a location where there's going to be a Love Mama event starting March 14th through April 14th. And the majority of the booths were already taken. So, and it's a very large area. So, yeah, this Love Mama is some serious mess.
Oh yeah, yeah, Ver, I made a pregnant avatar, but I think absolutely yes. If someone's discussing about adding an LSL function to have it call a script to the HUD, I think that would be great. It's my opinion of building these things. I gotta say,
Okay,
like
yeah.
nod. People would like that. It would definitely. If you guys are in discussing that, yes. But just my 2 cents there. Um, So how do you think that going to the cloud is going to change the grid? I'm curious about that.
Well, that's a good question. I think I don't think we know all the implications yet, but it does. I think ultimately it's going to give us more flexibility. We can offer more kinds of regions potentially, and it's easier to add or remove regions as we need to. If there's more demand, it's easier to scale up. You have a lot. The promise of the cloud is that you've got a lot more. You got a lot more flexibility and scalability. Whereas if you just have a big room full of hardware, then kind of do as much as that hardware allows, and if you need to do more, then kind of stuck. You got to go out and buy more servers. I think the first stage is just to get it working at all. We pretty much just did a straight port of everything that was already running in our in our facility. So, but over time, I think we're going to be exploring a lot more options there, and it's probably going to affect the degree to which we can scale things up and what kinds of offerings we're able to do. Or to that.
Is that going to have any impact on the amount of people that could be rendered on a sim at the same time? Or the two aren't related to that at all?
Well, potentially. If we decide that we want to be able to have regions that run on, run on higher end hardware or whatever, to support more people being there at a time, then of course it does make it easier to do that. In terms of how many people you can have around at a time, it depends on multiple things, right? It depends on the capabilities of the simulator, but it also depends on whether your viewer can keep up and can actually draw all those avatars at the same time. So, depending on what's limiting you, the change to the back end may.
Did that get cut out?
No, you're here.
Oh,
No.
okay, that
Sorry, were you
sounds
not?
Oh.
Was I dropping out there?
You dropped
No?
right at the end. Oh, for
Oh.
me, but I think I got most of it. That sounds.
Okay. Okay.
I
Good.
don't want to like take over your YouTube thing. I just.
I'm so
What about
happy that you're
are,
here.
are there any changes to the avatars? Are there going to be any like updates to how we can? Because right now, so for example, for the pregnant woman, I think I asked you this before. We had to move. We couldn't import a custom rig. Do you see, like, are you guys in talk about any changes to that down the road?
I don't think we're gonna have custom rigs soon. I think it's a tricky question, both from a technical perspective that we don't really have any way to let people sort of define their own rigs, but it's also tricky from a marketplace perspective. If basically if every avatar can have a completely different rig, then is that going to be a problem in terms of kind of splitting up the market more and making it harder for people to find compatible? So, I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I think there would be some tricky discussions there before we got very far with that one.
What about, I shouldn't, actually, this is not my interview, so go ahead, I'm not going to talk anymore.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk anytime if you want to come to the content creators.
Yeah, I'll come to the
whatever.
content meetings. I've been so busy. I've been working so many hours
Carrie,
trying to get this out.
say
Yep.
what you want to say. I already told you.
Yeah. No, I'm good. That's really all I wanted to say. The animesh babies, I could talk briefly about that. Again, because the Lindens allowed that technology, I was able to make those babies with my team. And what's nice about that is, animesh. Right now, you can only hold 2. Are there going to be any changes where you can hold more than 2?
Don't know. We don't have any particular plans about that right now. Yeah, if it's okay with Sky, I'd really be curious to hear more about kind of what your objectives were with the animesh babies and what kind of decisions you had to make along the way.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So what happened was that it was a 2-year project doing it. Basically, what we had to do was we made we basically made a series of animations. I modeled the baby in Cinema 4D, but Cinema 4D doesn't have an Avastar kind of import that Blender does. So I worked with an animator, and then I passed him the baby in a T-pose basically, and then he rigged it in Blender. And with the SL rig, so it was made smaller, the bones were made smaller, but because it was a human, it wasn't too terrible to do it. And the really cool thing was we were able to create custom animations for facial expressions, and then custom animations for walking, and, well, not yet walking, we're working on that, and crawling. And then we were able to compile these together randomly, so the baby looks like it randomly has expressions and randomly moves its arms and randomly runs these different animations, so it almost looks like it comes alive. So does
it look like that to you, Veer?
I'm sorry?
No, to Veer, do they look kind of real to you?
They're like dolls.
No.
But yeah, but it's increased a really significant amount of role play for people, and so for me it was a pretty challenging project because we had no idea kind of like how far we could push it, and it was a lot of testing and figuring those solutions out. Like, for example, here's an example. Like, if we have a baby crawl through a tube, so randomly crawl around and then crawl through a tube, we have to make an animation where it starts at the beginning of the tube, crawls through it, and then crawls back out to end at where it started from. Otherwise, it would kind of bounce all over, because it's not like an avatar where you can determine where it moves. So we had to animate around those parameters, which is fine. I mean, we did it. It was really a really fun project. The other thing that is interesting is we figured out a way with animesh. So this was actually a really interesting thing. So with avatars, because you guys made the animesh have a land impact based on the amount of polygons that it held, it really pushed us to make a very optimized product, and that is great because I think it pushes other creators too. So what that means is that animesh, even though it's 70 land impact, it is not high in polygons. It's actually a low polygon object. And what you want in these video games is you want an efficient model so you can have things render pretty quickly. So we built a clothing system, and we actually didn't allow third parties to make clothing because we had this ability for people to be able to transfer babies through HUDs. They res them through HUDs. And in order for the person, I don't know if you guys are still following me here, but if I'm the parent and I own the baby, I'm the true owner. But I can assign someone as a caregiver, and what that means is I'm essentially giving them a HUD, and then they can, and I'm giving them access to my data. So then they can res the same baby I have because everything's driven off an external database. And then what happens is because the clothing exists inside the baby, once our database knows what that baby is wearing, when the second person reses that baby, it'll appear with the same outfit on. Now we did that so really as a result of an exploit that happened before. So before we made the babies transferable, people would steal them. And so we wanted to be able to both people to be able to res them without stealing them. So we couldn't make them transferable, but we had to figure out how to make them shared. So we made them res through a HUD. Now again, that actually affected the way we made clothing, because if anybody was going to make clothing just freely, we wouldn't be able to control that clothing. So that means that if some person, Joe Smith, made a shirt and me, the mother, bought that shirt and put it on my baby, and then I allowed my dad to have access to res that baby through the HUD, it wouldn't know it was wearing that shirt because it wasn't part of the baby inside of it, if that makes sense. So and as a result of us controlling the shirts and the clothing, it kept the land impact of our babies very low. Because if we allowed anybody to make clothing, they may not have been so careful as to make the polygons of the clothing low. And we found that if you have too high of a poly count, there's a limit to the amount of polygons an animesh can have, and if it's too high, it doesn't work. So if we had allowed everybody to make clothing, it would have ultimately broken our product. So it was an interesting series of events that happened where we discovered that our decision to keep clothing within our own parameters of our own team eliminated a huge problem, or avoided a big problem that could have happened had we not done that.
Yeah, that's a trick. That gets into a tricky area. We had a lot of discussions around permissions and customizability, during animesh development. I think is one of the trickier areas, and I don't think we got to go as deep into it as we really kind of wanted to, just based on trying to get something shipped. But that is one of the trickier things, is that depending on the particular product and the creators, whether you're trying to have sort of an open ecosystem or trying to maintain more control, it can be kind of tricky trade-offs there.
Yeah, we had to have a controlled ecosystem so we could remove the potential exploit of people reselling it. But had we not, again, people would have made clothing that could have caused the animesh to break without us being able to do anything about it, except saying, "Hey, don't wear that particular shirt."
You'd be worried about sort of blowing out the triangle limit if you've got somebody sticks on the wrong shirt or something.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, it was a really challenging project to get out. But the more the Lindens, again, you guys push to the limits of the capabilities of what we can do. It really allows creators to explore what those are and how we can further push them. So it's exciting. I think that animesh was a real game changer in Second Life.
Totally.
And again, I think Bigs on Meshes too, because again, I'm looking for things that not only look beautiful but run well. Right? You can look beautiful, but if you can't see it,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's but it was those challenges, I think, figuring out the clothing, and it's very different because with avatars, people make an avatar, then they get these kits out, and then anybody can make clothing for it. And we couldn't allow that for animesh. And I
Okay,
don't,
but
yeah,
excuse me for one moment. You
yeah,
have a baby HUD with clothing.
yes, yeah.
The clothing HUD has over 5,000 pages. There's over 400 affiliates making clothing for these babies.
So
Okay,
what
you
they're
may
actually,
continue.
yeah. So what is so we provided the meshes. So we have about 125 individual clothing items that reside inside the baby, inside, not like inside an object that's inside of it. And then what we do is we created a HUD that knows. So if the baby puts on a shirt, or let's say the person who owns the baby assigns a shirt to the baby, the shirt goes on the baby, and then they wear a HUD, and that HUD knows that they're wearing that shirt. And so what we then did was we built an affiliate third party, because we still want in the third party market. We don't want to not allow other creators to create. So I don't know if you know this or either ver. So what we did was we built a texture HUD, again driven off this database, that knew what your baby was wearing, and that other people could buy kits and they would be given those particular meshes. So they would be given the shirt or the pants that they could then texture in Photoshop or in Substance, and then they could upload their textures on a website, and then they could become texture artists and be part of an affiliate group. So she was saying there's about over 400 individual texture artists, and
Wow,
then
that's huge.
Yes.
they sell their, yeah, they sell textures. So even though we may make a mesh of like one particular shirt, the community has hundreds of them because they all have various textures on them. So it did open up. So there's thousands and thousands and thousands of textures for these clothing items. So it really did allow for more versatility in the product. Yeah, I mean that was pretty interesting, to do that. But
Yeah.
that was
Awesome.
Sky, I understand that you're interested in the animation, the babies. Do you want to comment on kind of what particularly grabs you about the product and what things you found the most interesting?
Wow. I love them. And they are they are so unusual. They do funny things. They mess with the parents. They when you're trying to give them a bath, they'll like jump out of the tub and run around, crawl around. They're just so attentive. Um, the animations, each baby is different. So if you have like some people have, 10, 15 babies and they're all different. And all over the world there's creators for these babies clothing. But the impact that this has had on their lives and me being able to talk with them has been just the ultimate, and it's basically Carrie's brilliance, because even though there's all these animist babies, none of them are like these. And it's just kind of overwhelming when you think about it, but I've talked to people all over the world and they all love these babies.
that's really kind. Thank you. That's really kind of you. That's really sweet. That's very kind of you to say. One really fascinating thing. I don't. First of all, it's not me. I have a bunch of people working on this. I'm not that brilliant. Trust me. I'm not. I'm not that smart. I have people I work with that are way smarter than me. But the interesting thing is that, and I don't know. This is what actually really drew me to Second Life. That is just psychologically really interesting. We find that when we are in these spaces, even though these things aren't real, when I say real, they're not physical. We're not holding them in our physical space. They really, we build this connection to them. And I want to say one of the things that was fascinating, because I've been doing this a while, making products for about 14 years.
Yes.
And one unique thing about the babies compared to, let's say, a different kind of product like a breathable, because we made breathables once.
Yes.
What happens is when you're given a product that you have to nurture and hold, you build an emotional connection to that product. I shouldn't even call it product, that whatever that is, that thing, if it's a puppy or if it's a baby or if it's something. And then when you go and you engage with that with another person, that builds another level of intimacy. So one reason I think when we learned that from making products. Honestly, I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, like this is the idea of the world. It doesn't work that way. You make things and you sort of are agile and change along the way until you figure out what sort of really attracts people. And the fascinating thing about that is that when we made these breathables, and the breathables were adorable. It wasn't like they weren't cute, but because they were disposable, because the objective of using them was to get the best one, the way that the community uh, used them, or I even felt towards them, was very different. They didn't feel a connection to them.
No.
So that I thought
Don't want to
just
get too attached.
yeah, like because they were trying to breed them to get the better one, to get the better one. And in this case, the product was really about loving it. It
Yes.
wasn't about, I'm going to breed this to get another one that's just slightly better than the last one. And so that I think is really interesting when it comes to making products in a virtual space. Is that there's reasons why you feel that connection, and it's not necessarily, has nothing to do with me personally. It's how we as people are attracted to certain things, and how they're made, and what happens depending on how they're made. So if the objective is you make a product that you want somebody to hold or care for or give to somebody else, suddenly people feel a stronger emotional connection to that than they would if you make a product that you want someone to only make money off of. It's not nearly as you know like it's not the same kind of connection.
But also
So
the babies interact with us. They the animations are that they are attentive to us and that they love us. So that's where the key is. And everybody's just going crazy over these babies worldwide because they act like our babies. And that's the programming, right?
well, again, so I'm not a here's where I come in, like I'm not a software developer at all. I work with them all day long.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we created a series of animations, and they're randomly played, and the code triggers them depending on specific animations or specific expressions or specific responses depending on what you're doing with them. So every single baby is actually not quite unique, but they all sort of run differently
Yeah.
depending on what they're playing, so they feel unique. But it's really the same baby, just duplicated. They just run at different, depending on what they're doing and depending on how they're responding to you. It feels that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, thank you. It's really kind. You don't. I mean, sometimes when you make stuff, you don't quite know how people are going to respond to it. And my head is usually around making really products that work really well,
Yes.
and thinking about how,
Yes.
like, the Lindens offer new technical capabilities and how we can take advantage of those to make better products. So that's usually where my head is at. I don't but it's interesting from your point of view, you as a user, someone who really feels a deep connection. It's really wonderful to hear that. Like I don't quite hear, I hear that, but I don't. My
Yeah.
head is very much in, all right, let's
Well,
solve these problems.
that's
Then
that's why I wanted to talk to you because it's not just me, but it's everybody who has these babies, and you need to know that because life is so hard right now, that this you're making and YouTube you're making so many people happy. It's just crazy. It's just so wonderful.
Well, great. We're really happy to hear that, and it's you often don't really know kind of how these things are going to affect people until they're out there in the world. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You have no idea. He's totally right. You have no idea how people are going to respond to it or how until you make it.
Yeah.
It's like designing a room until you actually finish designing it and walk in the room. You really don't quite know exactly what it's going to feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah. And
So that's,
the
yeah.
newborn, everybody's just fascinated with the newborn, and because they do different things, and they also have quite a big personality, even just being so little. So, and then the experience of people being able to have a baby, and it seriously pops out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so one thing we did was we started with the, I'm sorry, shit, hold on. Let me just tell her, she doesn't know I'm on a call.
No
Um,
problem.
sorry, let me just tell her. So one thing, I don't know if this happens to you guys, I'm constantly like ding, 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 ding,
Yes.
ding, ding. So one thing that we did was we worked backwards.
Mommy.
We worked backwards because, uh, well, because of these new capabilities, Bakes on Mesh wasn't out yet, and Animesh was coming out. So we made the babies first, and then instead of making the mother and then the newborn and then the baby, we made the baby and then the newborn and then the mother.
Mm.
So that wasn't sort of an interesting thing. But right now it is, again, Second Life is very much about role play, and and I think that if but like, we can actually give birth to the baby now, like literally give birth to it, and then get it and keep it, and so that again brings another level, a deeper level of connection because if you feel like it's part of you,
Yep.
uh, so that's sort of where we're at right now. Is we figured that was actually harder than making the baby itself, was figuring out how to give birth to it. That
Yeah.
was a hard thing, but it's really wonderful. Like first said, we don't know how the world or is going to respond, especially now when COVID, people are indoors a lot and it's a difficult time. So I'm grateful that these products have really helped people emotionally. It's really nice to hear.
Yes.
So but yeah, my head's always at, all right, what can we do? How do we push these boundaries
And we're
next?
so fortunate that you are a perfectionist because you are, and that's why your product stands out from all the others.
Well, please, like I said, it's really not me personally. Like I have people
Well,
that
you're
I've met.
smart enough to
Yeah.
have the right people, though.
Yeah,
You know, it's like there's a brand of trees, Hayabusa, and they are just like outstanding. And so, they know to have the right people to make these trees move like, they're in a storm for their animus trees. So, yeah, that's what it takes. It takes, the person knowing who to hire and then wanting to have that particular, perfect product to them, but to everybody else, yeah, that's perfect.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's I've been really lucky to find the right people.
yeah,
But again, like with anything else, like you have an idea and then making that idea come to fruition. I mean, I'm sure you have a community of people that somehow sometimes think differently about how they should go, and but if everybody kind of is in a general agreement, it's you can make something really really terrific with the right group of people. The other fascinating thing too is like before all this, like I used to work in a normal job, like in real life. But
yep,
but what's interesting is that you can accomplish the same goals and make something without ever being in the same room.
Yep.
And we found that with COVID, people are working from home and can still be productive. So,
Yeah, a lot more people got introduced to that over the last year.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've been living in this COVID world for like 14 years because I
Yeah.
haven't worked in a regular job since then. But yeah, I mean, with Discord and Skype and the and the just I mean, there's an endless community of people online that are willing to share their insight and knowledge. It's really amazing how you can collaborate. And it doesn't necessarily always take money. Like if someone's new to this and wants to make a product or an education, I do have a background in fine art, but I don't know if it's necessary to go to college to do this. Like that's another thing. Like if you there's so much knowledge you could have just by learning through tutorials and then finding people to collaborate with. By doing those things, you don't necessarily need what you think you do. Like for
Or
example,
learning on the job.
yeah, totally. Like I never went to school for 3D modeling. I went for fine art and painting. Not like it matters, but it's just the people who I work with. They didn't particularly go to school for this stuff, but they're exceptionally bright and
Yeah.
creative and
Yeah.
communicate well. So yeah, and then you learn on the job exactly. You're like, okay, well this breaks. How do I fix it?
Yeah.
But when you have, I think, the right team of artists and software engineers work together, I think then you have a really great product. It takes both those kinds of brains to sort of work together. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, I only my head's been in Bakes on Mesh because I'm like, oh my God, finally,
Yes.
an efficient avatar. Like it's fun. I was really
It's
neck
been
deep.
a dream of ours for a while.
Oh gosh, I'm so glad. Like it's me here, same here. So yeah, if you had called me like a year ago, I would be talking probably more about the animesh stuff. But I've been kind of neck deep in Bakes on Mesh and figuring out how to optimize that for a while now. So
Well, honey, the things that come out of your creation, we don't care what you do. We're gonna buy it. We're gonna use it. We're gonna love it.
yeah, I mean, to
Thank
be
you.
honest, I appreciate it. How I'm a single mom. It's allowed me personally. It's changed being able to work here full time has changed my life. I don't. I can work when I want to work, and well, which means like always. But it's like, but it's I don't.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful to have that. I feel in a way like when I was younger, I had this dream of being an artist. I went to school for art. I have a master's degree in art, and I'd always wanted to be an artist. But if you think about that's kind of a challenging goal. Most people don't get to be artists,
Right.
or at least living off of that. And in a way, I feel like I was, even though I don't know how you define art. I mean, this wouldn't go in a gallery, but I do feel like the life I'm living is very much like an artist. I don't, before I worked in advertising, and it's, even though I'm making a product for a consumer, I get to really have a lot of say in what gets made and how it gets made and collaborate with people without making something for Nabisco. And so for me, that is really liberating and brings me a lot of joy personally. So,
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that I can do that in my life, do something that is fulfilling in my life that I enjoy. And I think that comes out, if you like what you do and you don't dread it every day, it's still hard and takes a tremendous amount of time, but it's something that you love. And I think when you do that, people it shows in what's being made.
Yep.
And so
Yeah, that's. I think that's a lot of what's exciting about Second Life is the way that it, kind of unleashes a lot of people's creativity who might, not otherwise be able to, do those kinds of things. The open-endedness it cuts both ways. It's so open ended. A lot of people have a hard time figuring out what to do with it. But once they kind of find something that clicks with them, then it's so flexible that things and
What
Yeah.
delights you, Veer? What delights you still about Second Life?
yeah. Well, I think that's the big thing is just being able to see what people are able to do with the world and being able to bring this kind of virtual space to life. That was one of the things I was most interested in with animesh was being able to just have more activity and more stuff going on as people can kind of make things that interact with them all
Yeah.
around them. So it's
Yeah.
really exciting to see the applications there. Sorry to say, I'm going to have to run in a couple of minutes of an
Yeah.
event to go
Well,
to,
it's
but
you guys' fault.
just yeah, but it's been great, and thanks so much for the invite.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna go. I'm making more video tutorials. Teaching people how to use, trying to convince the whole community to use Bakes on Mesh. That's
Yeah.
what I've been doing is video tutorials. Like, hey, make a BOM arm now. This is how. So, yeah.
Thank you
But
both.
thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you both so much. And we were only going to do 10 minutes, and it's been longer. So we love you. Bye.
well,
All
thank
right,
you. It's
bye.
been great
Thanks.
talking to you both.
Nice
Bye.
seeing you, Vera. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.